Hey, what's up? Johnson Meds from simpleprogrammer.com. And today I am actually going to I thought I'd do a discussion with Josh Earl. If you don't know him, he is the mastermind behind the marketing at Simple Programmer. And he hasn't had too much FaceTime on Simple Programmer, but I thought I got a couple of questions from Josh on Slack about weight loss plateaus. Now, this would be kind of an interesting discussion just to have and to kind of troubleshoot and to talk about. And I tried to record a video answer, but I just kept on getting into the weeds too much. So I need someone to pull me back here. So
back from the brink.
Yeah. So welcome, Josh.
Yeah, good to be here.
So tell me about the problem, or tell everyone so we can.
Well, it's not a huge. So I've been dieting down. I'm looking to get my body fat down to around 11%. Is my goal here. I've always been. I consider myself to be the skinny fat kind of prototype. I've always been a little bit. I'm kind of lean, but I don't have a lot of muscle either. And I've never been very happy with my body. So I'm working on getting down to. I've lost about close to 20 pounds so far.
Yeah.
And I need to lose probably another 5 to 10 to get to that 11% mark. At that point, I should have, I won't have a six pack, but I should have some abs, and my muscle will start to show a little bit of definition. So, and then from there, I'm planning to start to slowly bulk up and try to put on a little bit of muscle after I finish the cutting process. But so I was looking at I've been tracking my progress I've been doing this for about 7 or 8 months now, and I've been tracking my progress in this cool app called Trend Weight, which connects to my Fitbit scale, and it averages out the a lot of the fluctuations that you see because of stomach contents and body and water retention and everything. So you get this nice line that kind of shows you what your progress is instead of these little data points that bounce around all over the place. And basically, I've just been. I'm okay. I'm not super frustrated, but it's interesting because it seems like no matter what I do, I've actually done this process twice now, and it seems like no matter what I do, my body will only allow me to lose half a pound per week, no matter what. I've tried all kinds of stuff. I've tried adjusting my calories. I've tried doing low carb, no carb. I've tried lately. I've bumped up my exercise. I have a treadmill desk and I walk up to 7 miles a day during the week. I cut my calories down about as low as I'm comfortable doing. And it's no matter what I try, it's that if you look at my fat loss line in Trend Weight, it is I don't know what the degrees is, but it's basically a straight line from last December or November or December when I started all the way to today. And it's just kind of, I think what's baffling to me is just more the fact that the math that, you do all the math. I track my calories like crazy. I literally weigh things to the gram in most cases. And I'm tracking as closely as I can. I track all my exercise with my phone. So these are real numbers. They're not just oh, I think I ate 1 piece of pizza and that's 200 calories when it's actually, I ate 6 pieces of pizza. So there's not a lot of human error in there. It just kind of baffles me that no matter what I do, it seems like that half a pound, I feel like I should be able to get closer to a pound.
Right.
But it's really frustrating because, I've at this rate, it's going to take me another 3 or 4 months, and I will have been dieting for close to a year.
Yeah.
And that does screwy things to your hormones. And
oh, sure. Yeah.
I'm just tired of it. And it's just kind of puzzling why I can't seem to get more than that half a pound a week, no matter what I do.
Well, there's a few things okay, so I think the first thing to do is to debunk that, first of all, and I can do this real quickly, even though it's not a solution, but let's just debunk. If you don't eat for a week, you will lose more than half a pound. Agreed?
I guess, but I mean, well, okay.
I mean,
so currently, doing the math.
Right.
My current calorie burn is somewhere between 500 to 5,000 to 10,000 extra calories per week.
Right.
I'm burning almost twice as many calories as I'm eating. Or
well,
no, I'm burning about this. I'm burning an extra. My deficit is almost as many calories as I'm eating. It's theoretically a deficit that should allow me to lose 2 to 3 pounds a week, and I'm only losing half a pound.
But I just wanted to like establish the point that like if you were to not eat for a whole week, you would definitely lose more than half a pound, right? Like just to like, I mean, you could test it if you want.
I'm not willing to grant that, John. No, I don't know. I mean,
just a logical test, right? Like
I suppose.
Because you have to kind of overcome that mental limitation of realizing, yes, it's possible. Like your body is not like, unless you're like breathing, like you're a yogi and you're breathing in energy from the air, right? You're going to expend more than a pound worth of, calories, if you don't eat for a week. Like if you starve yourself for a week, you definitely would lose.
I guess.
And the reason why I'm starting there is because that's like you have to start somewhere where that's the absolute solution to the problem, right? Like and we need to reframe the problem a little bit because it's not exactly, but if you just said, hey, I want to lose more than half a pound a week. And I said, and you said, what is the most guaranteed possible way to do that? I would say, well, don't eat for a week. You'll definitely lose more than half a pound. Right. So we have a solution. So now we can work backwards from there and say what is actually feasible and what makes sense and what is going on here.
Yeah. Well, we have to work backwards to a solution that keeps me out of the emergency room.
You wouldn't go to the emergency room, but
I have in the past. I have cut my calories back to 1,000 calories a day, and I did not see any increase above that 0.5 pounds a week.
And there's a few reasons for it. Well, okay, so then, I mean, before we get into the reasons, I think one other thing to do is to redefine the goal slightly too, which is, again, there's two things I want to say. So one is the goal is obviously not to just lose weight, which obviously is to lose fat, because you can lose bone density, you can lose muscle mass, you can lose water weight. You want to lose fat.
Yeah, and that graph I sent you, the one that's like a straight line, that is actually my fat loss percentage as measured by my scale, which isn't super accurate, but it's an indication.
Right. And that's why I want to point to that, because, and then that's the other thing that we can look at too, is it's like, just because you're losing half a pound max per week doesn't mean that some things that you're doing are more or less, or don't have more or less effect. Because when you just look at that, your body could essentially be, you could be limited to half a pound per week based on what you're doing, but what you're doing may have more beneficial or less beneficial effects. I guarantee you, if you're eating 1,300 calories a day or 1,500 and you cut it down to 1,000, you're going to have a greater effect, right?
That has not been my observation.
But you might not see it in weight. You may not see it in weight, and you may not see it immediately.
Yeah, I suspect I would actually see it. It would be more in the muscle, and less in the fat.
But that's not necessarily true. Okay. Especially if you're not doing any kind of weight training, and it also depends on. And so this is where we'll get into I think some of the complexities of this, because it's a multivariate equation, right? There's multiple ton of variables that are going on, from the psychological to the hormonal to just plain physics that are interacting here together, which causes this problem. I mean, at the very base level, your physiology does not want you to lose weight.
Right. Yeah.
Especially if you're not training, or I mean, now you're doing strength training, but when you're not doing strength training, it especially doesn't want you to lose weight, because that is essential, and you don't have a reason to, like, there's not you don't have enough calorie surplus that there's a reason to keep to lose the weight, right?
Right.
So I would say that, your body's fighting against you. And the thing is that's also that you're struggling. Well, before we get into that, the other thing to say though is if you are at a constant slope of weight loss,
keep going.
that's better than most people. So
yeah.
Like, if you're like, oh, it stopped, it plateau. We're kind of calling this a plateau, but it's not really a plateau. It's really like you're at a constant slope. It's just that the slope isn't steep enough for you.
Exactly.
But that's still, I mean,
well, it's that the slope isn't steep enough, but also the fact that nothing that I have tried has had any impact on it, which is just odd. Yeah, which is just odd.
Okay, so that's where I think we can address some of the issues. So first of all, like that, I wanted to establish that base because what you may have been doing things that have had impacts that have not shown up directly in weight, and your body may have compensated in various ways. So one of the ways
in weight or body fat percentage, the body fat percentage has been consistent.
Well, okay. So there's another point there, which is weight, on a day-to-day basis, obviously is not reliable, right? You can't say, oh, I lost 3 pounds yesterday. That was awesome. Right. It's like, yeah, okay. But on a week basis, you can say, okay, well, if I weighed myself on Monday and I weighed myself the next Monday, the changes there are probably pretty realistic. It really takes about a 2-week basis to have any kind of confidence. Like if you weigh yourself on Monday and then 2 weeks later you weigh yourself, that's probably pretty accurate. Like you're probably body fat is beyond that for the most part, right? Unless you're super lean. When you get super lean, then the measurement is more accurate in general because you're dealing with a smaller change. But in general, I would say that body fat measurements can fluctuate, especially depending on the level of measure. But to get a trend reading on that is very, very difficult because of how much they can fluctuate in most of the, like using a scale or something like that.
Well, but that's where the trend weight tool evens that out to where I can see. Yeah, I can see it. When last time I did this, I was tracking body fat by waist measurements.
Right.
Like tape measure, and it was like a freaking clock. It was like a quarter of an inch per week was like the most I could do. And then once in a while I'd have a week where it would drop 0.5 inches, half an inch, and I'd be like, yes. And then the next week it would be 0. Right. And so I would be back to the 0.25 inch average.
Again, there's some people that are going to watch this and be like, what? You're dropping 0.25 a week off of your waist and you're complaining?
Yeah, I know.
So if you're making progress, you're making, but I've spent about 2 years doing this. So, so I've got some experience now. And the question is, so why does the math not work out? I think that's really where it comes into play. And there's a few things here that's happening. One, you're chasing a moving target, and the harder you chase the target, the faster the target moves at the same time, because your body, it's an adaptive system. Again, that's why I said it's so many multi-variables, is because, and it happens at multiple levels, right? So if you cut, if you cut calories, let's just talk about the psychological standpoint of what your body's going to do to you that you're not even going to know. So let's say that, and this happens when people raise activity level. When people start running, they mostly gain weight, which is really strange. And a lot of people that train for a marathon, they gain a lot of weight. They'll go up like 5 pounds. And the reason why that happens is because even though you're burning more calories, your body overcompensates in calorie intake. And even if you're weighing your calories, there's there's two things that happen. One, slight discrepancies get your judgment factor, or even just what you crave, because the thing is, calorie counts are not accurate, both in burn and on food labels. And so there's quite a bit of interesting things that can happen that you can't really count on them. And then second, like even as small as like if you exercise, you may sit on the couch a little bit more later in the day, or you may fidget less or stand up less. And so sometimes that you can have a pretty big, when you factor in both of those things, you can have a pretty big overcompensation where you're, obviously if you're not counting calories at all, then you're pretty much screwed unless you have a lot of experience in it, because you're going to eat more than you think, because your body is really good at keeping you alive. Anyone who's still alive, their body is good at keeping them alive.
Right. Yeah, and you're talking about, so that's a neat energy expenditure, right? It's that non-exercise energy. So your body will like downregulate the extra, it'll eliminate activity that you would have done otherwise if you're expending more. So that makes sense.
And this is just really at a psychological level, because you're being tripped up by yourself, right? It's like you're just fidgeting less, you're just walking around less, you're just, you could overcome that if you knew it was happening and you compensated for it. But in general, it's happening so unconsciously that you're not even realizing. You're eating an extra bite, you're doing, whatever it is. But that's compounding with also another thing, which is that the actual, your body. So I guess what I say with that is when a lot of people say your metabolism drops, they're wrong. Your metabolism doesn't start dropping when you diet. It's that your body gets tricky on you just from a physical standpoint. You actually started moving less. You actually started like sitting, you feel more tired. So you sit on the couch more, or you're at a more of a rest state. So your base metabolic rate did change, but not like at a chemical level. It changed at a physical level, or you literally ate more. But the other thing that can happen, and this is more likely with the prolonged dieting, again, chasing that target that's moving, is as your diet extends and your prolonged dieting happens more and more, so your body can actually down-regulate your metabolism by shutting down non-critical systems or reducing them. So
liver, who needs it?
Yeah. Well, one of the first ones to go is the reproductive system. And then the next one is the immune system. And so, and it's not like those things just totally disappear. It's just that, okay, we don't expend as much energy here as we were before, and that could reduce the total calories being used. So, and that's not even talking about like partitioning, right? So then when you get into partitioning, your body, the particular hormones that you're producing and releasing, again, after exhaustive dieting, after high stress, and you're putting yourself under higher stress when you increase the intensity. So if you decrease your calories, you make things harder, or you increase your exercise, your cortisol, for example, is going to rise, which is going to enhance the ability of insulin to store fat. Yeah. So it's going to make things a little bit more difficult. It may even slow down. You may even have a slowdown in your digestive system if you're eating less food. And if you have a slowdown in your digestive system, you're going to absorb more calories from the food that you eat. Right. So there's like all these factors that can come into play, I think.
So the way, like, kind of what I'm theorizing here, based on what I've been thinking about and what you've been saying here, is there's kind of this range where up to a certain point, you're going to lose a certain amount of weight.
Right.
Once you enter that, there's like a zone, right, where it's like you could do 10% effort, or you could do an 80% effort, and you're probably not going to move the needle at all. And then you actually have to go to the point off the deep end where you were talking about earlier, where you're like severely calorie restricting and just basically forcing your body into, beating it into submission. And that within that band, like, so for me to go from walking 5 miles a day to walking 7 miles a day probably isn't going to do a whole lot. But if I were to go up to 20 miles a day,
right,
it probably would. Or if I cut my calories from 1,300 down to 800 a day, it probably would. But then, I'm actually potentially causing a lot of other problems too.
Yeah. So you've got it precisely right, and I think that's really the philosophy behind it. Is it's like you've got 3 modes. One mode is like almost like minimum effective dosage, which is
Yeah.
is like, what can you do that will move the needle? And
Right.
that's that whole knife's edge thing, is like, if you're just like burning an extra 100 calories a day, you're losing weight. But if you're eating an extra 100 calories a day, you're
Right.
gaining weight. And so over time, the cumulative effect. So you can be like, there's a range in there that that is kind of a tight band. But then there's like the second level would be doing stuff that requires maybe twice the effort, but only produces 50% of the results, the increase, the diminishing returns. And then there's the extreme where you've gone so beyond the levels that the diminishing results are eliminated. Now you're actually getting the results again, and they're not diminished because it's so beyond what, for example, like taking running for example, like what I'm doing with my running. To run, at first I used to run 5K. I used to run basically 3 miles 3 times a week. So that's 9 miles total in a week, right? Okay. So if I increased that at one point, and I started running 6 miles per run 3 times a week. So I was running 18 miles a week. So that didn't have really any effect. It had a small effect. It was twice the effort, but it didn't have anywhere close to the effect. But now I'm running 10 miles every time I run 4 times a week. So I'm running, over 40 miles a week. Mm-hmm. That has a huge effect, because and the effort is not doubled again, because the effectiveness is more than doubled, but the effort isn't, because the difference between running 6 miles and a run in 10 miles, it's not twice as hard to run 10 miles, even though it's almost twice the distance. It's only about 25% as hard, because if you've already run an hour, you see what I'm saying? But you have doubled the amount of calories that you're burning, and also you've depleted glycogen, you've fasted, like you've burned more fat, you've put yourself more in a fat burning state. So what I'm saying is that, and that applies to a lot of things. It applies to how much food you eat. Like the difference between cutting calories and fasting is huge, obviously. So what you should try to do is either be on one end of the barbell or the other, like the whole Anti-Fragile, if you've read that book.
Right.
Because in the middle of the barbell is just suck. It's harder. It's twice as hard. You get half the results.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to.
Yeah. And I don't know at this point with where I am. It's my feeling, and with what I've experimented with, it's my feeling that the other end of the barbell is pretty far away.
like the extreme end. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm like I've currently I'm eating about 1,350 calories a day. I weigh this morning I weighed about 134. My target is probably somewhere around 125. Like that's where I'm going to end up, which is pretty darn skinny. And I'm walking around 40 to 45 miles a week.
Yeah. And
doing some strength training three times a week. And so, so for me to drop, last time I did this, this is the weird part. Last time when I did this, I wasn't doing any exercise. I wasn't walking. I wasn't doing any strength training. Right. And I was eating about 1,300 calories a day, tracking it the same way I am now, and I was losing half a pound a week. Now I'm eating 1,350 calories a day, walking. Oh, and the last time I did this, I was having these crazy cheat days on Saturday where I would eat like 4,000 or 5,000 calories. I'd like literally buy a box of donuts and just go to town. And this time I haven't been doing that. Last few weeks I've cut even my cheat days back even further, and none of it. Yeah, and that's where it's like none of it's really had any effect at all. So I feel like the other end of the barbell is probably sub 1,000 calories a day, and probably similar activity levels or maybe even higher. And I cannot. I feel like I can't be productive and have like a productive life at that. So my plan right now is to just start sort of this week. I'm trying some carb cycling. I'm going to try that for probably 2 weeks, and then I think I'm going to start cutting things a little bit at a time. Like I'm going to probably cut the activity level, so I'm not walking. I'm walking 2 miles a day or 2 hours a day instead of 3 hours a day.
Right.
And I don't think that's going to have any impact at all doing that.
Right. And
So,
this is where the tricks come in. And this is where, like, I mean, there's multiple things that you can do, because again, with the barbell thing, it's not an all or nothing either. It's like, it's one end of the barbell is extreme in fitness, one is extreme in diet, and then one is extreme in optimization of timing. And I think that there's various ones that you could hit. I mean, if you obviously, like, again, part of the reason why we're doing this is because I'm putting out the kind of fitness and diet program where essentially it hits all three ends of the barbell, right? It's like it on all those areas, but you can pick one of those and still have a big effect. And the other thing I would say too is even with the changes you've made now, there's two possible things that could be going on, right? Because you've increased activity level and you have cut out cheat days. So,
and I've also, the other thing I did was I was a little sloppy on my calorie tracking.
Right.
And I stopped, like, having 5 pretzels and not tracking that.
Right.
Like I was doing that a couple times a day. So it was a little slop. It was probably 100 calories or so extra a day that I was taking in. But so I cracked down on that. I ramped up my activity level. And I also, I cut my cheat days and I was more strict. I actually lowered my calorie target a little bit.
Yep.
Which, when none of that really has done anything
that you know of yet. Here's the thing. So you started that about a week ago, I think, maybe.
No, well, I did.
2 weeks?
It was about 3 weeks ago.
Oh, okay. So you still may have, like, again, like so depending on how big the impact was, if the impact was such that it caused you to lose, let's say, 20% more weight, right?
Right.
Standard deviation says that in 3 weeks of measurement, that there's a high probability that you wouldn't be able to detect that change, right? So there's still a possibility that you are getting those effects. They're just small enough. I mean, because you didn't go so far to the end of the barbell that you got 100% increase, right? You probably got something at the most 50. I don't think 50, but I think probably maybe a 10 to 20% increase in fat loss from what you've described, and that sounds like a probably accurate. And so that may not be detectable over 3 weeks. But there's also a few other things that could be happening too. You've added strength training, so you could have repartitioning happening where you're building muscle, you're using some of that calorie. And this is kind of a theory that I have, that I think that if you are able to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time, then it's going to show up as a positive on the scale, or very, like, it's going to blunt that, because the idea that a pound of muscle or a pound of fat is 30, about 3K worth of calories, whereas if you take those 3K worth of calories, it's actually, fat is 9 grams per or 9 calories per gram, and you take that and you convert that into muscle, not that it's a direct conversion, but if you gain equivalent amount of muscle, or let's say half that amount of muscle, then the muscle also carries with it 4 parts of or 3 parts water per as it stores glycogen in it. So you're actually going to suck in more water, whereas fat is just fat. It's like in a fat cell, it's just triglycerides. But in a muscle cell, it's not just muscle. It's the protein fiber, which is 4 calories per gram, but it's also the water and the glycogen, which adds a lot more mass to it. So I think that's one thing that can just be the trick on the scale. The other piece of this too would be, this is something that's, again, a theory. I got this from Lyle McDonald, and he talked about this idea that he's kind of discovered in training people, which is, and this is theoretical, but he thinks what happens is that when you lose fat, that the fat cells, he said that they don't immediately shrink. What ends up happening is that the fat cells that had triglycerides in them, that had the fatty acids, that they end up basically as your body, and I won't go into too much of the details, but as it's pulling out fat stores, it's being replaced by water. So they're not losing size immediately, but he said then every so many weeks there's this flush and there's this drop. And
I've seen that. And I've tracked that exact thing, and actually that one I mentioned earlier about the half an inch, quarter inch, no inch. Yeah. Like I think that's what's happening.
So there's a good chance that maybe next week you'll say, oh crap, I just lost 1 pound this week instead of half a pound. And that'll be why. It'll be because of the effort that you did from 3 weeks ago that finally hit that point where, you know, there was enough water in the bucket for it to tip. And that's right. So I think that you'll probably see that, because I mean, realistically, like, yes, your body is going to overcompensate. You know, there's going to be, and here's the thing is, like, again, with that chasing, if you reversed what you did versus time. So if the level, as you've progressively dieted, you've progressively increased your aggressiveness, right? You have decreased calorie counts, you've increased activity, you've added weight training, like you've done these things. If you had done that in the reverse order, so if you had your intensity what it is right now when you first started losing weight, I guarantee you would have lost more than half a pound a week. I guarantee you. But then if you but then it would taper down to less, because if you're not chasing.
I mean, I haven't tried like all of this stuff before, but when I first, the reason that I ended up where I was because I tried a bunch of stuff early on, and I figured out like this is like none of this seems to be making any difference.
But if you chase the rabbit, right, at a medium pace, the faster that you chase the rabbit, the faster the rabbit is going to run away. Right. Unless you can run fast enough that you're faster than the rabbit. So if you see what I'm saying? Like if you're chasing a rabbit and you start out with a jog and then you start going faster and faster and faster, the rabbit's just going to keep going faster and faster. But if you started out with a full out sprint and caught the rabbit before it had time to, you know, get its acceleration up, not that I don't think that you could actually catch a rabbit, but supposing that you could, then that would be, so you would be able to see that. But right now you're chasing a rabbit, and the harder you chase, the faster the rabbit's going. And like I said, it's multiple things. It's psychological, it's physical, it's the hormone levels, right? It's just the basic physics of the fact that you're losing weight. I mean, you're compensating for that one, but again, the thing on the calorie counts too is that it's so off, right? Just slightly changing the foods that you eat, the type. If you're not eating the exact type of foods, even though it adds up to the same amount of calories, your body, your physiology is craving the thing that it knows has more calories, even though the calorie reading says that it shouldn't, and because it's smarter than you are, and even on those things, right? Like if I come up with a diet plan, like a calorie diet plan, I always overestimate 10% the calories that I eat, and I underestimate 10% the calories that I burn. And even then, it's like you can't do the math. You can't say, okay. I mean, you come up with the basic math, and you say, I want to lose a pound a week, so that's about 3,500 calories that I need a week in deficit. So I'll lose 500 a day in deficit, and then it either works or it doesn't. And if it doesn't work, you just have to. Yeah.
Well, I think that all makes sense. What's just odd to me is that I feel like I have so overshot the 500, like the 500 calories a day. Like my deficit should be so far beyond that it's more like my deficit's more like 1,000 calories a day.
Right. Yeah.
Which will more than compensate for any amount of extra slop in my, I mean, like even if I'm, so if my deficit, if I plan it out so that it's like 10,000 calories a week, which is, I'm somewhere between 5 and 10,000 calories a week, which should be enough theoretically to lose, if everything was accurate, that should be enough to lose 2 to 3 pounds, right?
Right.
So even if I'm overestimating by 100 calories a day in my exercise, that's like, so if I'm burning 200 calories less per day, I'm still burning 800 calories per day, which should be well in excess of what I need to lose a pound a week.
I agree. And I think that I would say that with the adjustments that you've made, that you will, like, that what's happening here is just a random luck of the weight of that, and possibly the flushing thing, that you will see the effects if you keep at it long. I think you're running faster than the rabbit at this point. Like, I think the changes you made are faster. I don't think they're a whole lot faster than the rabbit, but I think you're catching up to it. And so I think you will see an increase. I think in the next week or two, you'll probably see a pound or a quarter of a pound, like extra that will come off on the scale. Aside from the other variable you threw in, which is the weight training, which that is going to throw things off because you're getting beginner gains from.
That should be detectable with my waist measurements and the scale.
Yeah.
I mean, long term. So.
Right. And then the changes that you're making now, so then that's where it's worth talking about, like and you're already making some of these changes because we're going to discuss them, but like how to optimize this now is really the timing is the key. Instead of increasing intensity, like the thing that's give you the biggest bang for the buck is going to do the carb cycling, which is essentially carb cycling, but you're going to be basically like eating ketogenically for the non-lifting days, which will prime your insulin sensitivity for the lifting days, that when you lift or when you do your strength training exercises, that the calories that you take in there will be more likely to be partitioned into muscle or absorbed by the muscle as glycogen instead of going to fat storage. So that's going to give you a double whammy. And that's why that I think is important, is because it's not only going to prevent you from storing extra fat, but it's going to increase lean muscle mass at the same time. And so that's going to be hitting it from both sides. So you should see a dramatic effect from doing that. And that's, from my experience, from what I've been doing, I saw a ridiculously dramatic effect. Like I was like, you saw my stats, I was actually going up in weight and losing fat at the same time, being already extremely trained, running 40 miles a week. And so I think that's going to move the needle more than anything else.
Right. That makes sense. Well, I am trying that now. So I started yesterday, so we'll see. My wife got a bunch of bacon and eggs at the store today. So
nice.
I'll be 4 days a week. I'll be basically living on bacon and eggs.
Try to get some avocado in there so that you're not totally on the completely saturated fat side of it. Avocado, any of the saturated fat is not.
Yeah, I have some nuts in there too. So
yeah, processed food can also some of the other things, and that's another aspect of it too, is like it can really depend on what you eat. Like there's a difference, even how you chew your food can make a difference on how many calories you absorb, which is kind of, there's so many ways that can, and what you eat it with can make a difference beyond how the gut absorption works.
Yeah, that's so just for people listening into this, one thing I've been doing some research lately about the skinny fat guy syndrome, and with basically what the people that I've been following online are people that have like been in my shoes, and they've beat it.
Yeah.
And they seem to pretty consistently say that if you have this build, which is like basically you tend to be more slight, and it's harder for you to put on muscle, but then you're also inactive. So you tend to, you add a bunch of fat, and then you're in this vicious cycle where you can't, you add muscle. If you try to do regular bulking, you end up adding muscle, but you don't add enough. You add more fat. So your partitioning is 70-30, you're adding fat, 70% muscle and 30% fat. Then when you try to lose, and your body doesn't let you lose that fat easily, so it takes you a year, like me, to lose the fat, and the muscle's like ancient history by the time the fat comes off. So basically, what I've seen is that like people who are in my shoes have said, you know what, it's a lot harder.
Yeah,
it sucks, but it's just going to be, you have to get a lot more variables right. And it takes more work.
Yeah.
And you got to get your sleep dialed in. You got to get your nutrition dialed in. You've got to get your exercise dialed in. And it just takes a lot of work. And you can't always just take the advice you read online at face value. You have to kind of like, you really have to experiment and dial in. And I'm trying to view this as like a good thing.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? Because part of the reason I've decided to get back on this fitness horse is like, I'm like, I'm at a point now with my business where I feel like some additional discipline and mental toughness would be really beneficial to me. And so I'm kind of using a lot of this physical training as a way to develop my character more. And so I'm trying to view the frustrations and setbacks as like
growth. Yeah.
Okay, this is, you know, if this is good, I have to work harder than the average guy. That's a good thing. All right.
That's funny. I just did a video. Someone just emailed me a question and said, how can I develop mental toughness? Like what steps I could take. And I basically
only eat once a day.
I said the fastest path essentially to mental toughness is physical toughness. It's like there's other ways to develop mental toughness, but if you want the surefire way, I guarantee you if you can run a marathon, you'll be mentally tough. Right? I guarantee you if you like put in the weight training, you'll become mentally tough. If you wake up and go to the gym every day or whatever it is, you can't help become mentally tough, right?
Right.
But yeah, so it's interesting because you have the same problem that someone who's already lean has, right? But even when you're not lean, that's the whole kind of skinny fat, like what you just described, the partitioning issue. And you get into that. It's not like, and I don't think that you're genetically born into the skinny fat mode. I think you get into it by a set of circumstances, which comes from not having enough muscle early on enough in life before you gained fat, and then when that happens, then it becomes really hard because once that balance is out of whack. And the other thing you can do with that is again, this comes down to that whole barbell effect, is the idea that like if you can be extremely aggressive, you can overcome that. But you've got to be able to and there's different ways, right? So for example, you could overcome the whole skinny fat thing by just like lifting heavy and eating a ton. If you gained 50 pounds, right? If you just over the next year, you're like, fuck it, I don't care what I look like. I'm just going to eat and I'm going to lift. And that's all I'm going to do.
I don't know if that's true because the guys that I've talked to or the guys that I've been following all tried that route, and I tried it too. And I basically did not gain much muscle at all, and I gained a lot of fat. And that's been pretty consistent. I think it's just that your hormone levels are so, like, you're just throwing off so much estrogen, and I've seen pretty much a lot of the skinny fat guys. The common thread is they all did starting strength. They all tried the eat big, lift heavy, eat big, get big. And basically they all come back to, no, get lean first. Yes, the bodybuilders will make fun of you because you will look like a twig, but get really, really lean. And then just very slowly, like 200 calorie surplus is, 250 calorie surplus is like what you want to target. You don't want to try to like go beyond that because your body will just start packing on the fat.
I think there's a little bit of bro science in there, but like just in these kind of theories. But I mean, well, okay, like I like to look at the extreme. That's why the very first thing I asked you is if you didn't eat for a week, right? Because in the extreme is the truth, and then from there you can kind of find. So I will take that to the extreme and say, if you gain 100 pounds over a year, and you're strength training as much as you can, 4 to 5 times a week, hitting it hard. And not just strength training, proper strength training with the goal of hypertrophy, right? So not just trying to, like sometimes one of the things with starting strength, the problem is it's really strength training. It's powerlifter training more so than it is muscle mass building, which it will build mass, I guarantee you, but it's not the most effective way to gain mass. If you're just concerned with gaining mass, it'd be more to be in for most people, the 8 to 10 rep range, and then increasing the overall volume. Right. So if you did that, if you did essentially bodybuilder type of workouts, and you gained 100 pounds, I don't care how fat you got, you would gain probably like 20, 30 pounds of muscle, or maybe it's not in 1 year, maybe it's like a couple years. Right. And then if you lost fat, you would retain more of the muscle. It's like the more muscle you have, the more likely you'll be to retain it. And that's because you would have broken out of that mold. And that's an extreme.
In my cuts, my experience is that I lose more. I lose pretty close to half of my weight loss is muscle.
Right. That's because you're not fat enough.
Well,
And it's not, okay, here's the thing. Percentages, okay, body fat percentage is a manufactured
right,
number. This is the thing I think to understand that most
right,
people don't like really get. It's like, okay, I could have the same amount of fat. Like I could be the same height. I'm 6'3", right? I could have
yeah,
the same amount of fat, but if I have more muscle, my body fat percentage will be lower because my skin will be stretched more. There'll be more surface
right.
area to distribute the fat, right?
Right. Well, but yeah,
So,
but I'm just talking like if we're just talking purely that extra 100 pounds, right? If 30 pounds of it is muscle and 70 pounds of it is fat, and when I diet, I lose a third to a half a pound of muscle for every pound of fat.
right. But
No, 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 no. It's closer to 50-50.
and I agree, it's probably 50-50 where you're at. But what I'm saying is that if you're carrying 70 pounds of extra fat, I guarantee you it won't be anywhere close to 50-50. It'll be like 90-10. You never had a point where you're carrying 70 extra pounds of fat. Trust me, I have. And I know that when you're
Right.
losing fat, when you're fat, it's fat. Like when you're losing
Right.
weight, because your body is going to say, oh, this is what I get rid of. And also you're carrying around the extra fat, you're doing extra work, right? And every time that you move and just living, that you're stimulating muscle, muscle cells. So that's what I'm saying. It's like, again, I'm not recommending that you gain 200 pounds and then lose, but I'm saying that would be one way, like on the barbell, to break out of the mold. I'm just throwing this out there just so that people can understand the different ways. Like it's almost a guarantee. Like if you did that, because it would change your, and again, that's why I said the body fat percentage makes a difference, is because if I have a lot of muscle, right? And so my body fat percentage is lower technically, but I have more fat on me, or I have the same amount of fat as I would look different, but also the way that my body behaves would be slightly different as well, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's the thing to keep in mind is like with that is that if you it's not the percentage, it's the overall amount of fat that you have that's going to determine, how much excess fat do you have. If you have a whole lot of muscle, you may still have a lot more excess fat so it's going to be easier. That's why bodybuilders have an easier time cutting fat percentage down, is because one, it just, the ratios work in their favor, for example, because of the surface area and spread, but two, because they're actually partition wise, they're carrying extra fat it's easier to get rid of at the higher stage. So the more muscle you have, the easier it will be to get rid of fat, both visibly and physically. But I don't recommend that route. But the route that you're going, you have to understand, is harder, and it's the reason why it's harder is because you're essentially forced to take the middle road, because the other alternative would be to go so extreme in the fat burning, which is kind of you're kind of going down that road now, because now you're doing carb cycling, you're fasting, you're eating one meal a day. So you're going to overcome the partition problem, but you've got to be able to hit the weight in a balance such that you are overcoming that 50-50 ratio. Because if you're at a 50-50 ratio or worse, you're stuck. No matter, when you go up, you're stuck. When you go down, you're stuck.
Right.
It doesn't change anything. So either you're going to gain a whole bunch of weight and you're going to overcome the ratio by gaining so much muscle and so much fat that when you lose the fat, it'll first come off real easily and you'll retain that muscle. So it's like this. I guess this is a better way to describe it. Suppose you gain 20 pounds or 10 pounds of muscle and 10 pounds of fat.
Right.
If you did that and then you started dieting, you would lose. When you lost 10 pounds, you'd lose 5 pounds of muscle and 5 pounds of fat and be right where you're at.
Right.
But if you gain 50 pounds of muscle and 50 pounds of fat, which would be like impossible to do, but let's say that you did, and you lost 10 pounds, you'd lose 9 pounds of fat. So if you gain enough muscle, then you won't have the problem. But if you don't gain enough, then you will. And that's
where I think the guys in my position are really. That's where it's really tough, because like I got all the way up to, I went from, so last time I did this, I dieted down to, here I can tell you what exactly what happened. I dieted down to 135, which is right around where I am now.
Right.
And let's see here. So my lean mass peaked at 121 pounds.
Okay.
So that's like everything, including. So I went from 130. I was working out and eating, and I went from 135 up to 154. So that's about what, a little over 20 pounds.
About 20 pounds,
about 19 pounds.
Yeah.
And I put on. So I had 121 pounds of muscle. Now I have
I would get you put on 3 pounds muscle.
I have 116. I'm currently at 116 pounds of muscle at 134. So I gained basically about 5 pounds of muscle and 15 pounds of fat.
Right. Okay. And
losing 15 pounds of fat, that muscle is gone because I lose about, it's closer to 50-50.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You would have had to gain, like I said, probably 50 or more pounds over a certain amount of time in order to gain enough muscle so that you would not lose the muscle. So
basically I would have had to go up to like 200 pounds.
And the other thing you would have to do, so the other way you can influence partitioning, and this will really screw you, because I've lost weight both ways. If you don't continue to lift weight and to lift heavy while you're cutting, you will absolutely mess the partitioning up, where you're going to be more likely to burn muscle than fat.
Right.
So I don't know if when you were cutting, if you were continued to lift heavy.
Yeah. No. Well, I got the reason I quit lifting because I got injured.
Yeah. So that'll screw you right there. I mean, that'll most people that are trying to lose weight that are stuck in that, it's because they're not, or they change their lifting to doing lightweight, high rep, thinking that that's what bodybuilders do. But the answer is, when you're cutting, that's when you need to be lifting at the most intensity possible, because when you're gaining weight, it doesn't require a huge amount of stimulus to gain new muscle or to keep the muscle, or rather to keep the muscle, right? To gain new muscle, it requires more stimulus. But when you're losing weight, it requires an extreme amount. You have to really convince your body that you need this muscle. Otherwise, it's going to say, no, let's get rid of that.
Right.
So that's the thing. So I think, if you're doing strength training, if you are doing the carb cycling, like I said, that's affecting the partitioning. So you may be able to push, as long as you've got the partitioning working in your favor, then you're going to get the positive, or you're going to have the positive transformation. If it's working against you, the more that you work, the worse that you'll be.
Right.
So,
which is the trap I've been in. So, trying to shift.
And once you shift this balance, then you'll be out of it forever, because once you have reduced the partitioning, because let's say that you get down to, let's say that you got down to like 10% body fat, right? Now, if you start to gain weight, you're more likely to gain muscle and fat in a somewhat equal proportion, because you have less, because you have more muscle, because you have less fat overall. Right. I mean, it's still not going to be as good as when you're fat, you're gaining muscle.
Right.
Like that's, that partitioning is ideal. That's why you look at powerlifters, and especially really huge powerlifters, they're fat asses. And the reason why is because that's the optimal place to gain strength and muscle, is when you're, because your body is going to be able to do that. You've got nothing, you don't have any negative effects working against you.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah. So cool. That's helpful.
Yeah. So as long as you've got the trend that you
yeah, I'll keep riding this pony till it keels over.
Yeah, that's about the best that you can do. And you're going to hit a point where, I mean, and the thing is, like, the key point will be to make the progress. I think also for you too will be like, can you, like, you hit your goal, right? And you're eventually going to hit it because you've got the slope, right? That's not changing. Right. If you hit your goal, can you pause and maintain and sort of, at a neutral position until you can go and do another lap around the pool?
Right.
And that's the struggle for almost everyone, is like, can you tread water long enough to recover your energy to go for another mile swim, right? If you can't, if you screw up there, you're going to start over again and it's going to be
Well,
worse.
I think what I'm going to try to do is hang in here for another 2 or 3 months or however long it takes me to hit 11%. And
Yep.
I think at that point I'll be pretty happy as far as how lean I am. And I'm going to try to see if I can hold that level for a couple months maybe while I continue to work on my strength training. And then from there, I think I'll slowly add calories and see if I can just watch what happens very closely and not, and probably experiment with a few different things, but, try to keep it very moderate and gradual.
That'll be a good experiment for the program that I'm working on. See how it works at a slight calorie surplus, or how much you'll be able to possibly test to see how far you can push the needle on how much calorie surplus you can do and still gain the benefits from the carb cycling aspect of it. But
my goal is I figure I'm probably got at least another year or two of tracking my calories ahead of me, and then hopefully at some point I'll be able to eat like a normal person and not have to track every single thing I eat. But
that's the problem with being OCD, I was just talking about like, oh gosh, what would it be like to just like, sometimes I fantasize about having a normal life, not being an insane OCD person. Sometimes I'm like, what if I just like, what is it like to just not have taken the red
just have low standards,
just to be like, okay, I wake up in the morning and I go to work, and then work my 9 to 5 job and come home, and just at work, I eat breakfast and I eat whatever I want for lunch. We go out to eat, and when I come home, I eat some dinner and I watch some TV, maybe play some video games, and that's it, right? Go out and drink with a few buddies. Like, I'm like, what would it be like to have a normal life? But that's not possible for us. We've already taken the
it's
pill,
too late.
so.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks, Josh. Hopefully this will help any of you out there that are struggling with this as well. And and I am still coming out with the program. I'm actually still perfecting the program. I'm actually taking it to the extreme right now, and I'm doing instead of doing the low carb days, I'm doing complete fast days to see how that affects the insulin sensitivity to see if it benefits overall, or if it's better to have the fats on the low carb days and then to eat more on the high carb days. So I'm way cutting calories on this cycle of it. So because I have to get back from my China fatness. I'm also not shaving.
John was a regular guy for 3 weeks and he gained like 10 pounds or 15 pounds. So
yeah, I know, it's good. Well, I went from like, it was an artificial gain, because when I got back, like I'm now only like a few pounds heavier than I was, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But in fact, on the scale, I'm showing a little bit less than I was before I left. But that part of that's because I was fasting so much recently. But I'm probably like a few pounds overweight. But my body fat percentage skyrocketed. It went from like 7% to 10%. So I had a repartitioning nastiness happen against me. And I think part of that is because my theory is because I fasted. I did 1 meal a day some of the time I was there, and I did no weight training. And so I think it actually worked against me.
Oh, wow.
In that case, because I wasn't consistent, and because I did no weight training. Right. So I think what ended up happening was when I was not eating and I had no muscle recovery and I was fasting, I was actually wasting away excess muscle. And then when I would eat regular meals on the days, I would be gaining direct fat. So
you're also to the point where your body is like going to be really unhappy about that level of body fat.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have to I'm at the extreme of the skinny fat. Like in order for me to, where I was right before I left Vegas, before I went to China, I was sitting at pretty close to 7% body fat.
Right.
I was at such a level that like anything that can gain me fat will gain me fat. Like I have to be so strict at that point. Yeah. But
the 10 to 12 is kind of seems like it's like the ideal range for a guy. If you can stay in there, your body won't be too cranky with you.
Yeah. I think that's, yeah. It's funny. But see, the thing is, like, this is the thing is, like, the more that you go down this road too, the more that your mind warps. Like, I look in the mirror right now and I'm at like 9.5 or 10% body fat. And I'm like, damn, you're fat, dude. You're fat. Like, I can't see myself as anything but fat, right? And until I'm back down to where I was. So I'm like, there's veins in your forehead, yet you're calling yourself fat. Like, how is this possible? Like,
well, your fitness program needs to come with a warning label then.
Yeah, it does.
But will permanently alter your consciousness.
It happens as you have a higher level of standard. And it's weird. Like, I just wonder what my vision, like when I see people and I gauge, like, you know, fat, like sometimes you'll watch a movie, like, what was that one movie with, where the, you know, who's ever that hottie guy that all these girls are obsessed with it. He pulled you know what I'm talking about? There's some movie where he like pulled off his shirt and she's like, "Oh, shut up! You have abs too." And I looked, I'm like, that guy doesn't have abs, dude. He's got a roll. And I'm like, I just wonder how warped my view is on, like, do normal people even notice the difference between someone at like 12% body fat and someone at 9%? Like, I think probably not. So, but I can't go back. It's another one of those red pills. So, all right, we should probably wrap this up.
All right. Thanks, John.
All right. Take care.
See ya.